Hello everyone, welcome to the Cyber Weekly. The Cyber Weekly is a podcast which talks about cybersecurity with me, Deogratius Okello, Josephine Olok, and Angella Nabbanja. Today's discussion, Angella is now being the key moderator of this. So I'll just pass on the torch to her and she will take on the rest.
Thanks, Deo. Welcome everyone to this episode of the Cyber Weekly. Today we host Solomon Ruzima, an experienced ICT professional specializing in cybersecurity and networks. Solomon has a master's degree in cybersecurity from Northeastern University, a bachelor's degree in engineering, in telecommunications engineering from Chambogo University in Uganda. He holds various certifications in cybersecurity, like the CompTIA Security Plus and many others. He's currently working as a platforms engineer at the Auto Europe car rental. Solomon, could you please tell us where that is?
It is based in the USA. It is basically a car rental. It's a hospitality company that does more like what you see Booking.com does. We manage platforms and partners use the platforms that we set up to be able to do their businesses.
Oh, that's interesting. Please tell us about yourself and how you got into cybersecurity.
Yeah. The journey has been from childhood. I've always been a science person. I always liked engineering things and stuff like that. In that, I always envisioned myself always ending up in a science career, whether it would be something to do with chemistry or physics or mathematics. That's what I loved. I was a math geek when I was young. I competed in several mathematics contests in Kampala especially, and went almost to district levels representing my schools doing that. In that, this is where it led me into doing sciences. Then at the end of it all, I ended up doing a bachelor's of engineering in telecommunication engineering. And in there, while I was doing that, I used to envision myself just dealing with telecommunication. Then at a certain point, while I was doing that, I ended up dealing with things like IoT. And this is way back, we're talking about something like 2009, where I was dealing with Arduino Unos and doing all sorts of IT work. And at one point, I always think about how did I end up doing cybersecurity. And when I think back, at one point I did a project where we did transmission. I did something that has transmission over frequency. It's more like how you do a radio station, but a local thing using Arduino Unos. And for some reason at that point, I took over someone's frequency, a well-known radio station's frequency, and I was transmitting over it. But at that point, I did not know what all this was. And when I presented it to someone, like, oh, yeah, this is somebody's frequency. If UCC finds out at all that would be a problem. So, but coming to think about it, I think that's where all this started from. And then I never thought that I would end up in IT. Somehow I ended up doing IT work, got interested in networks, did simulations of networks, how we used to imagine different things, simulate networks using GNS3. And from that, I met a few people who are doing different things, who are in security and all that. And then they showed me a different view of things. They're in technology, but then they showed me a different view of things. And that's when I started building up curiosity. And I'm like, okay, if things are like this, how can I make things work the way I want them to work? Things usually work in a normal way is that, okay, you're sending a packet from A to Z. I want it not to go to Z. Okay, you're sending a packet from say computer A and you're sending it to computer D. I don't want it to go to D. I want it to go through another channel and then gets to D, and all these communications are encrypted. I want to be able to see what is there. If one of the colleagues I used to work with used to tell me, when you have information and control, then you have a lot of power. So that is what I always looked up for. Like, I need to be able to see everything, to have everything in control. So that's how I end up doing security, and I learn more of, I end up doing things to do with governance and security in my previous workplace, and I did a few things, some security functionalities, things like that. Then later on, I end up getting an opportunity to study cybersecurity. So when I come to study cybersecurity in the US, I end up in a university which is very, very technical. And I start studying it, and wow, that's when my eyes opened up, and I'm like, okay, I was just touching a little bit, like I was just at maybe 1% of cybersecurity before, yet I thought I knew too much. So it opened up very many things, and my mind was opened up. And one of the classes that I took the professor taught us that to be a very good security person, you have to have the attacker's mindset. And when I switched from that point, I switched my mind completely to the attacker's mindset, in that everywhere, even in my normal life, everything that I do, I look at it in the attacker's mindset. Is that, oh yeah, we're going to do this. What would an attacker look at? How would an attacker look at this? So if you look at it with the attacker's spectrum, you're able to think before you act. You're like, okay, yeah, let me not do this. So literally, when I'm doing things, when I'm setting up things, I think of protecting them from someone who could, from myself. What can I do to break this? And when I look at it that way, is that I see myself not as a very experienced attacker, but there are people who can really who have more skills than I do, and they can do this crazy work. So I always look at it that way before implementing things. So basically, that's how I ended up in cybersecurity. Yeah.
Quite interesting that you mentioned math contests. It has brought back so many memories, and I think every child who grew up in Uganda, in the early 2090s, know about that math contest. You know how you think it's a maths contest, but then you go there and you don't even use a calculator. I think they were just training us to have critical thinking, and it was basically logic. Those are great memories. Did you do the one where you had to go to Makerere University for the finals?
Yeah, I did all those. And yeah,
and
thinking about calculators.
You find the brightest minds, teachers. It was just so interesting.
Thing about calculators is one of the things that I think about looking back. I'm like, remember when we used to use logbooks to figure
Hey.
out
Deborah, did you use a
math
logbook in
equations?
school?
Yeah, I used one.
Younger than us, so we have to double check. Yeah.
Really?
Oh, logbooks. But
So,
now calculators draw graphs, it's just interesting to see the advancements in technology.
yeah. So, what does your role on the platform as a platform engineer at Auto Europe car rental? What does it entail?
Basically, as a platforms engineer, my role is more of things to do with DevOps, though I include DevSecOps. So we'll see through all the implementations that are taking place. And right now, I'm more into automation and things like that, dealing with continuous integration and continuous deployment, whereby if we're going to implement networks, we are implementing networks using infrastructure as code. The beauty about infrastructure as code as compared to the traditional way things are done is that infrastructure as code is very easy to bring up in case of things like disaster. When things go down, it's very easy to bring everything up. It is more controlled, is that you have control of everything that is happening. You're not going to set up a system and then after a while you're like, oh, there is this service that is running there. No, that won't happen because you specify which services you want to run on the system. So if you look at it in cybersecurity perspective, is that you're doing what they call least privilege principles, just giving a system to do only what it's supposed to do. And then with all that automation, we're doing automation of like things to do with authentication and all that. How do you manage tokens, secrets, and all that? And all that is done by infrastructure as code. In that, right now, if God forbid, if something bad happened and there was a compromise on maybe infrastructure, I just have to press one command to tear down everything, and then you will not have any access at all. And then the same couple of commands to bring it up very fast. It will take me like maybe a day as compared to the traditional one where you have to go individually to every network device, every server to set up all this. So we have all this in code. You just run them at once.
Thank you for your answer. You mentioned that your masters in cybersecurity opened up your eyes. So I imagine that you have a lot of skills now. Has it really helped you with hands-on skills in cybersecurity, and also do you consider yourself like now an expert in the field, in cybersecurity field?
Yes. So what I didn't mention is during the day, I'm a platforms engineer, and during the night, I'm a security researcher. So I am doing.
Oh wow!
I'm doing a lot of stuff. I've done one talk so far, and right now I'm preparing for another talk, which is I don't know whether you know of something called B-Sides. B-Sides it's not as big as Black Hat or DEF CON, but it is next to it. So yeah, I'm working on that, and then I'm doing I'm working in open source projects in cybersecurity. Right now I'm dealing with I participate in MITRE attack with Caldera tool, which does simulating and emulating more APT, advanced persistent threats. So what I was doing in my master's, I learned how to I did research on and wrote papers. For example, I did research on attacks, then link the attack to an APT. Then after linking the attack to an APT group, then after that, simulate the attack based on publicly available information. So with all that, I've been able to do that. And that's what I do when I'm at night as a security researcher. I will look at what attacks have happened of recent, then research what are the tactics and techniques that were used. Then I will emulate them because I have already an infrastructure that already does that, is set up in place, in that I just have to go change all these, have payloads, change the payloads, and then try to emulate exactly what they have done. Yeah, so that's what I do as a security. I would consider myself a security researcher, and yeah, that's basically it.
That's nice. So we all have 24 hours, and other people are doing 20 jobs. They're always sleeping.
You'll be surprised by the thing is, when first, to be able to do all these things, you have to have a passion.
Yeah.
Trust me, if you have a passion, you will not, those extra hours that you put in, you won't feel them count so much. But then you also have to put a limit at a certain point so that you don't burn out. And of course, mental health, you have to think about that as well. So yeah, I work during the day, then in the night I'll do all sorts of research. I have all this planned out properly, and I have the times that I set up for that. And yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that you have a work-life balance. People would think, you just bury yourself in work, but work is important though. And so how do you protect against the most common vulnerabilities, like unauthorized access and data breaches in the design and implementation of your platforms?
This is a very interesting question, and if you're to go to when responding to it, you have to think of how you want to do it. So as me in person, I always recommend implementing security at every single layer of the OSI, of the stack. Like, you implement at all layers, which is more or less defense in depth. But before we get to that, I would follow like a few things. That is security design principles. You have to look at security design principles. Which are those principles in here? Things like least privilege. You give people access to only what they need. Restrict users' privilege. Restrict machines' privilege. Most times people think that you only have to restrict access to human beings, but systems are talking to systems, and you have also to limit how much systems talk to other systems. Then I've talked about defense in depth, and you implement security at every layer. That is network firewalls, application firewalls, intrusion detection systems. Now there is web application firewalls, all that. So in that, if a layer is compromised, one layer is compromised, there is another defense that is there that is going to be found at a certain point that will stop the compromise, that might stop the compromise. Then you have to do things like fail by default. For example, when you're implementing things, by default, you should always have it to fail. Not by default, someone should not have access.
Access.
A system should not have access by default, in that you only give access when it is needed. When it's not needed, don't take out the access, remove the access. Then you have to implement robust implementation practices like secure coding. Secure coding, whereby there are very many times you find developers develop applications and they love these applications. They treat them like they are babies and all that. And sometimes they do not put security in mind when they are doing this. They put functionality as they are doing this. And I will not blame it on developers alone. Companies as well, they want their business to go. The competition is high. They want to release all the time. And when they are doing that, they are compromising with security. They're like, okay, yeah, let's get this done. And then don't put security ahead. You have to implement things like multi-factor authentication, role-based access control, then things like input validation, things like that. And the other thing that is very, very important is monitoring. Continuous monitoring is very, very, very important, because very many things happen and you always have to be watching whatever is happening. And besides monitoring, the other thing that after monitoring, there has to be an incident response plan. And with this incident response plan, a very active incident response plan. I have been in a situation whereby we did a pen test and someone detected us, but they did not react to anything. They didn't do anything. Then they come back 2 days later. That's when they are trying to fix whatever they are trying to fix, to look at the incident and trying to fix whatever happened. But 2 days later, I already have admin access already. So I already got literally what I wanted, and it's too late. Then classification of data, that has to be put in place. Then one of the other main things is security training, whereby security training, you're not only looking at you as a security engineer, you're looking at developers, you're looking at users, so that they can be trained on things like social engineering, phishing, how do they deal with this and all that. Then lastly, I would think maybe, though most times some people don't do it, but threat modeling. Threat modeling is a very, very, very important thing, in that it helps you at the beginning of the design phase, whereby you're going to look at everything that is being designed at every level. Is that, okay, yeah, when we design this, what are we protecting? What could happen? Where would an attacker look? What would an attacker be looking for when they look at this level? So you do threat modeling. There are frameworks which are out there like Stride, which you follow for systematic analysis of threats to do such stuff. So yeah, that's how I would look at
how you handle.
That's how I'd handle this.
Thank you so much. That's very comprehensive. And the thing is that also when developers prioritize functionality, also I'm just thinking about like applications here in Africa where you have to roll it out to people who are not typically tech savvy, and you say, let me say an app, you're rolling it out and it has to have multi-factor, right, authentication, and then people will just be stressed like, "Banange, all these passwords, what? Just that can throw people off and not use an application, and they don't know it's for their own safety." So, but also sensitizing users about the advantages of security is also another way to achieve secure platforms, use of secure platforms.
Yeah, you'd be shocked when you're interacting with a user who has taken security awareness training and a user who hasn't. They are two different users. They are completely different because the other one knows they're actually scared sometimes to even click a thing. So yeah, there's been a debate on how much, for example, the things which they call like phishing campaigns when you're testing your users. There's been a debate on should people continue to do phishing campaigns because users are getting scared to click on anything. On links, in that even the genuine ones, they will not click them. Hence, they're not going to be able to do their work. So I always think it is better to be overcautious than not cautious at all, because it will save you a lot.
Definitely. And I know for us, like fintech companies like the Momos, they have really done well because everyone now knows, when you have the Momo app, they'll send you an OTP. It's now seamless. But we've come from far to accepting that, this is for our own good.
Yeah. So, in your experience, do organizations benefit more from penetration testing or vulnerability testing? And are there scenarios where you preferred one to the other?
Yeah, I think both of them are very, very important. And one of the things that I do at my workplace is do vulnerability testing. I don't do a lot of penetration testing, but I do vulnerability testing. So why I say both of them are really, really needed in that one is scalable. Vulnerability testing is scalable. Like it is just systems. You're using applications. Look at applications like Nessus. You're using the Nessus to scan your whole infrastructure. You can do a vulnerability test on, like, say, hundreds and hundreds of computers in one day. But a pen test is you're using a human being. You're not going to get a human being to do a pen test on 100 computers in a day. It's not going to be possible. If you've had red team engagements is whereby you bring a red team, an external red team, to come and do a penetration test on your environment, depending on the scope that you've given them. But usually red team engagements take about 2 weeks upwards, 2 weeks and up. If you get a red team engagement, which is taking like a week or less than a week, I would think that that's not a genuine red team engagement. So, so where all this comes, if you're to talk about where each complements the other, you look at a scenario whereby you have implemented security in your infrastructure. You're like, oh yeah, we have MFA implemented, we have encryption implemented, we have role-based access control implemented. So how do you verify that this has been implemented? Sometimes it is implemented. Is it implemented the right way? How do you verify that this is done the right way? This is when you bring in a pen test. A pen tester is going to come with his own mind. If he finds when you've encrypted with DES encryption, not AES encryption 256, trust me, he's going to break the encryption. That means you've done encryption, but it is not the best to protect you. You've implemented MFA. Yes, you have implemented MFA. Have you given your users enough training to be able to know what to use to authenticate through the MFA? I can send a wrong auth application to your user and they will authenticate using that, hence giving me the tokens and all that. And then they will have the keys to the kingdom. So it is basically right now, when where vulnerability testing comes in handy is that if you're going to do things like compliance, in compliance, they will always want you to do vulnerability testing. Vulnerability testing is going to test against known signatures that are there. So it's going to test against the database of vulnerabilities that are there. What about vulnerabilities that are not there? So you test the vulnerabilities that are already there with vulnerability testing, then you bring in a pen test to look at vulnerabilities that are not there, that are not in the database. For example, vulnerabilities that are not in the database is things like misconfigurations. They're not going to be in the database, some of those misconfigurations. And then there's behavior analysis, in that there are these systems which they will always be checking against if you've implemented incident IDS and IPS. They are going to detect signatures, but are they going to detect behaviors? That is a very, very important thing, because these days people are not attacking companies using mainly the exploits that are there. They're usually attacking configurations, misconfigurations, and the only way you're going to see this is behavior analysis. In that, today your normal traffic is usually at a certain limit. What happens if it shoots up in a certain window? It shoots up. You have to find out, why did it shoot up? Is someone moving, exfiltrating information at that point? So at the end of it all, I think you need both of them for different cases, but it all comes down to the resources a company has. Vulnerability testing is less expensive compared to a pen test. You have to have enough resources. Pen tests are really expensive if you're going to engage red team, and if you're going to hire a pen tester, these are people who are going to be highly paid. So it's something that companies just have to think about. But in my perspective, you need both of them. At least you need to do vulnerability testing at least maybe twice in a week, and then a pen test, you need a pen test at least quarterly to see what is happening.
Thank you for that answer. When we talk about cloud operability, what's your experience with cloud-based platforms, and what's your take on the shared responsibility model? Is it important for the client to ensure a safe cloud environment, or should it be the cloud service provider to ensure that?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Right now, most companies are going to cloud. The reason, we all know the reason. It is very easy to spin up machines. It is, you can control the budget. Like, you only pay for what you're using. So, and as we look at cloud services increasing, becoming more popular and increasing, we have to think about this shared responsibility. The shared responsibility model is basically a cloud security framework that dictates the security obligations of the service provider, the cloud provider, and the users to ensure that there is accountability. For example, you're going to the cloud, you have to understand what is the responsibility for the cloud provider, what is your responsibility, and what are there as well those responsibilities that are shared between the two. So if we talk about, for example, if we were to look at the AWS's, Azure and GCP, we look at generally, we look at what are some of the services they are providing. If we're to the shared responsibility, we're to look at the stack of the cloud. Basically, if you're to put them in layers, I'll look at physical layer, infrastructure layer, virtualization of operating system, application, and data. So traditionally, when you have your data center, you're responsible for all that. When it comes to shared responsibility, depending on the model, on the cloud, on the model that you're taking up, say infrastructure as code, platform as code, or softwares. Infrastructure as service, platform as a service, or software as a service. That will dictate your responsibilities and then the cloud provider's responsibilities. So if we to look at infrastructure as a service, here you're looking at the physical layer, infrastructure layer, and the virtualization layer. All those are responsibilities of the provider, always. So that means they are relieving you of things like you do not need to have to build to put up a building for a data center. You do not need to worry about raised floor. You do not need to worry about AC. You do not need to worry about power. You do not need to be worried about redundancy. You do not need to be worried about availability. This is what their responsibility is. They should be able to, this is what they're supposed to do. And they usually, when you're signing these service level agreements, yeah, things happen. A disaster could happen, but someone has to be accountable for this. The reason why some of these shared responsibility models comes up is for accountability, so that there are consequences. In cybersecurity, most of the times we only look at the bad side. We don't usually look at the good side. We look at the bad side. When something happens, what is the consequence that has to be there? So infrastructure as a service, they will deal with physical, that means environment and physical, and then they will deal with the infrastructure that includes the networking of the equipment, the hard disks and air conditioners, power, and all that. Then they will deal with the virtualization. Virtualization is basically, you're looking at when people talk about a cloud, it is basically just a computer that is sitting there, a machine that is sitting there, but with very high performance, that has a host operating system. The host operating system is where you come and then you as a client, you're going to put your guest operating system on top of that. So the host operating system is going to be in the virtualization, on the virtualization layer. Then when you go to platform as a service, you have to look at the cloud provider will be responsible for a layer up that is physical layer, infrastructure layer, virtualization, and then they'll be responsible for the operating system. Platform as a service, usually companies will use this if you're doing things like development life cycle. You're doing platform, you're developing, you're testing, you're deploying. Basically, that is what you're doing in there. You have just like a continuous integration and deployment kind of pipeline in there. That's what you're doing here. So your responsibility as a client here is only the application and the data. Every other thing, let it come to spinning up machines when they are needed. It is the responsibility of the cloud provider. If it comes to patching the operating system, it's the responsibility of the cloud provider. The only responsibility you have there is just the application and the data. Then we have seen software as a service. Very many things like how we have our Gmail. Gmail account. It's a software as a service. You only use the application. You're not responsible for the network. If Gmail goes down, they will never ask you, oh, what happened to their network? You have to fix their network. You have to fix their power. You have to fix this. It's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is just the data in this case. They are not going to come and tell you, hey, do not send an email to a wrong person. It's up to you if you want to send it to the wrong person. That is your responsibility. And if there are any consequences, those are on you. That's on you. But if something happens to the application, like something happens to Gmail and then it goes down, that is not on you. That is on the cloud provider. So it's very, very important for people to understand these shared responsibilities. I've had scenarios whereby you find someone has moved to the cloud and will be like, oh, now I no longer need to do SOC compliance. Things like SOC compliance. Yeah, it's okay. Yes, the auditors are not going to come to you and then they will ask you, hey, how come the doors to your data centers are not according to the normal standards? You do not have a mantra. You do not have redundancy. You do not have all this. They are not going to ask you any of that. Anything with environmental controls or physical controls, because that is not your responsibility. In audit, they call this more like transferring risk. You've transferred your risk to the service, to the cloud providers. But there is where you have a responsibility in that. The SOC is, if you're looking at, for example, access control, the cloud provider will never come and tell you, give this person access, give this person access, implement MFA, implement this. That is your responsibility. So it's very, 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 very important for people to know their responsibilities, for customers to know their responsibilities versus the cloud provider's responsibilities. That way, you do not get into situations whereby you're like, oh no, that's what AWS or Azure or GCP are supposed to be doing. That's not our responsibility. No, everyone has to know their role, the role they play.
That's true. And to know our people, people could be compromised when they are hit, and they're like, you know what? We've been using AWS. I can't even believe we were hit. And then but like, they have not done their part. There's no encryption. There are no MFAs. Like they just moved to the cloud. They moved to AWS and they thought everything is done. And
yeah, it's in the cloud. It's very, very easy to spin up things. But by the default configuration, it's very, very easy to spin up things. The challenging and then make things work, which looks really fancy and sleek. The challenging part is getting these things configured the right way according to the standards, that the security standards and principles that are there. Getting them to do that. That is the extra work you have to do, which, yeah, me and all other human beings, we do not want to do that. We have that weakness, and well, we want the easy way. We always want the easy way. And once you find the easy way, well, the attacker is also looking for the easy way. Yeah.
That's true. And in your experience, what are the biggest security issues related to third-party integrations and dependencies? What is driving the current rise in attacks exploiting API vulnerabilities?
So this is very interesting, and if you to look at infrastructure, IT infrastructure now, and you have to compare with about 10 years ago, you would see a not even 10 years ago, 5 years ago, you see a very, very, very big difference. You're finding a small company of 10 people being set up, and they have all these applications. They have like this IT infrastructure, this solid IT infrastructure in place. But all that infrastructure, they have, these are applications I'm talking about. They have all these applications they're dealing with, but they do not have like physical infrastructure. They do not have the networks and all that. So they're having just applications in place, and all these applications are talking to each other. So there's more of machine to machine talking these days, in that there is what they call a SaaS mesh. They call it SaaS mesh network. SaaS mesh network is, you have software as a service, and all this software as a service are all talking to each other. For example, you find you have an application, you have Gmail. Let's say you have Gmail. Then you have to implement Google Authenticator. Then you have to implement Duo. You have an application which is running in Salesforce. You want it to authenticate with MFA Duo. You have SCI application, say for example GitLab. You have Atlassian. All these, you have Slack. All these, to be able to work, for you to be able to get the best out of them, they all have to be talking to each other. So what does that do? It brings about integration. With integration, if you're to look at it from the attacker's mindset, is that you always want integration. When there is integration, when systems are talking to each other, it increases the attack surface. So when it increases the attack surface, what is your job? Your job is to look at all these applications that are talking to each other. You look for the one that has that is the weakest. That's where you start your attack from. For example, there was an attack on GitHub. GitHub, you know how GitHub works. Other companies put their code, their repositories. They have their repositories with their code all there in GitHub. So what happened is the attacker just compromised a third-party application that integrates with GitHub, then got the tokens.
Yeah.
The token of this with GitHub. So when integration is happening, is that you give this other party your token. So you're telling it, oh, I trust you. Communicate with me. You can take this data from me, and I'll give you this data if you request it, and then all that. So they got the token, and then they just go into GitHub. From GitHub, when you get into GitHub, this is where the attacker would be like happiest. You always want to attack a big lucrative company that integrates with very many companies. When you're attacking, sometimes you may be attacking, I'll give you a scenario. You may be attacking a small company, but then if you're able to get access, if you're able to get to a point where you can get to a bigger company, where you find thousands of tokens, and you can get access to all these very many companies, what would you choose? Definitely, I would go for GitHub.
No.
And then get all these tokens, and then communicate with all these companies that are all the GitHub customers, and get all that they have get all the data that they are pulling from these companies. Then this will bring us to a point whereby organizations have decentralized ITs, in that you find organizations which have they have admins for different applications. You find that they have an administrator an admin for, say, Okta, they'll have an administrator for Salesforce, they'll have an administrator for Atlassian, they have an administrator for Slack, they'll have an administrator for Office 365, they'll have administrators for all these SaaS applications. So what happens is these administrators, for these applications to work very well, they integrate with others. So it's like, yeah, we have an application, say there's an application, a monitoring application called Zabbix. We want to have better visibility. So Zabbix is like, for you to have better visibility, you have to implement this API configuration and pull this data for you to be able to see things in a better way. So it's like, oh yeah, that is so fancy, let me do that. He configures an API token, shares tokens, copies the tokens to another system, and then systems are talking. But in this whole process, these ITs are not, and do not have firm security training. They do not have security skills. So what they end up doing is overprivileging the API integration. In that, you would think that the API is pulling ABC, but when you try to sniff the packets that are going between your application to the other one, you'll find that it is beyond the ABC. It is the ABC up to maybe says S or N or whatever. You're releasing a lot of information in this. Yeah, so this is what has brought up all these API attacks, and I think this is going to keep happening, and all that. It's going to keep happening. There are going to be malicious applications which are out there asking you to authenticate with them, thinking that you're authenticating with the right thing. I'm sure you guys have had this whereby you go to an application, and then for you to authenticate, it will ask you for consent, authenticate using your Gmail, right? Then you consent with your Gmail. Yes. How sure are you that this application is authentic? When you authenticate with your Gmail, you're giving it access to get information. Even Gmail will usually tell you, they'll give you the information. They'll be like, yeah, when you authenticate when you give consent to this application will have access to your private information. So yeah, you've just signed your information. You've just told Gmail, just give out all my information. So unless you trust the application, it's best not to do this. But like I said, we are all we human beings, we always like it the easy way. We do not want to go in there, create an account, and just specifically for that, we just want it to prompt our Gmail, we consent, and then things just work on.
That's true. And we actually reviewed the security incident with GitHub in one of our security reviews, I think like 2 security reviews ago. And it's just these open or authorization that we are so keen on using right now. And people will just continue, you continue with Gmail, continue with Facebook. But first of all, the origin is your weak password that you use admin123 everywhere. And then you continue. And then if they compromise that, with open authorization, it will bypass the multi-factor authorization, and then that's it. So putting security first as a user is also very important.
Yeah, these days, many people are implementing 2FA, a multi-factor authentication. This is a very easy way to bypass.
Bypass it, yes.
Yeah. So you find an organization saying, we have implemented MFA, our users have 12 character passwords, super complex and all that. Well, yeah, that's very, very good. But, well, that one user authenticated with the wrong auth application, and gave you out. As long as the key that you want is the token, because systems are not some systems are not so intelligent. A computer will only do what you tell it to do. It will be like, when you see this token, give access to this. It will not think twice. For you as a human being, you'll be like, hey, if someone greets you in the morning, hi, and then greets you again, hi, keeps greeting you, then you'll be like, but you greeted me earlier. And then you'll be curious what's happening. But well, with the token, it will just say hi. Oh, hi. Hi. Oh, hi. It will just keep doing it. Unless if you're putting some kind of intelligence, say, there are ways of limiting this, securing this. For example, if you implement API gateways, if you implement API limits, unless you've done that. But there are environments which move so fast that they do not put in this limitation. For example, I'll give you an example. How would you think fast-paced companies where they do deployments like super fast, they are picking data like really so fast, things like I'll give companies like, say, let's talk about, say, like Discord, like, say, Twitch. They talk about where they are releasing servers like every day, Discord servers. People create Discord servers every time. You talk about Facebook, people are creating accounts all the time. They're pulling data back and forth. So the limits they will put there, sometimes they will leave it limitless. Sometimes they'll put limits, but yeah, the attackers will always find a way,
They're also not sleeping.
Yeah.
Yeah, the attackers are not sleeping. So, what would you recommend as the best practice for cybersecurity professionals currently? And what advice would you give to those aspiring to enter the cybersecurity field?
Best practices, as I'll look at what do I do usually as me, is that I'm always super cautious. I am too paranoid. I fear clicking on things. I do a bunch of checks before I do anything. I'm too paranoid in that I will always have VPN configured on my phone. There is always encryption in everything that I'm doing. So it is always to be overcautious than not cautious at all. So I'll tell people who security professionals is that this is something that you should always do. Be cautious. That tell people not to use free internet. People are always looking up. They have gone to a store. They're like, oh, there's free internet. Let me connect to it. Even when it tells them that, well,
It's not secure.
Not secure. They'll be like, whatever. They'll just connect to it.
What do I have?
Exactly. And then guess what? After they have connected saying, what do I have? Then they will log into their bank account.
Their bank accounts, yes.
On this very insecure network. So do not click on things. Use password managers. I personally use password managers. I have a password manager, which is a software. I also have a password manager, which is a physical device, because there's some passwords I do not trust softwares to save for me. Like, we have seen password manager softwares being compromised. Though it is, if you're to ask me, what would I choose? To use my own, to not use it and to use it, I'll definitely use it. So have a password manager, put in all my passwords, and then the password to the vault is very, very complex. Good luck to anyone trying to get to crack that password. So that's what I would do. And then I use hardware tokens for this. The others that I think that the other systems that I think password managers will not protect me. well enough. And then security awareness. Security awareness is very, 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 very important. People need to know how the world is. It's not sunshine and rainbows out there. There are really, really bad guys out there who do crazy things, and you'll be so shocked by what you would find on the dark web, what people's credentials that are there. People have not hacked you not because they do not have the credentials. It's because they don't have a reason yet to hack you. If you become a very important person, well, they have the information there. They will get to you. So it is very, very important to know how to practice these security principles, best security principles, and make them part of your daily life. In that you're always watching out for this. And then with people aspiring to join the cybersecurity field, I would recommend to always, whatever it is, always have the attacker's mindset. That is the best way to secure and to get into to be a good cybersecurity profession. And you have to love what you do. And the other thing is that cybersecurity is a very, 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 very big field. You could go in there and get lost. Trust me, I've been there. I've been there whereby I've done digital forensic, I've done threat intelligence, I've done pen testing, I've done. Some of these things help to know. It's really important to know a bit about everything, but then you have to choose at a certain point. You have to decide where do you want to really go to be successful in this field. And the other thing is you have to have mentorships. You have to be in communities. You contribute. You have to have continuous studying. I always feel like I'm like 10 years behind the current cybersecurity trend right now. I'm always trying to study, trying to catch up. I'm always playing the catch up game. I'm like, as soon as I get to learn one thing, well, there's another new thing that has come up. I'm like, oh, then that gets on my list. I have like a very, very long list on things that I have to study, attending conferences, talking to people who are in cybersecurity field, in that they will tell you things that are happening, new things. That's how you get to know all these things. Then sometimes it will change your perspective on how you see things. Like initially, the way I used to look at social engineering, things like social engineering, I'll be like, yeah, it's very, very hard to social engineer me. It will be very, very hard, but trust me, I am a cybersecurity profession, but I will say this, I have been scammed and I have been hacked before. So if I know how they work and that has happened to me, what about a person who doesn't know how it works? So it's good to have all this information, keep learning and learning, so that in the end of it all, you build your knowledge, protect yourself, and protect the company that you're working for.
Thanks for that great advice, Solomon. And sorry for that you've been hacked.
No, it was it's one of those things. You have to go through it to
Rite of passage.
Yeah.
Rite of passage.
Exactly.
That's how you know the fire is hot.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you worked in Uganda and now you're working in the US. What have you experienced as the main differences? And did you come across any cultural shocks when you first went to the US?
Yeah, first of all, in the US, there are very many resources. I'll tell you that. In that, when I'm talking about communities, like communities, cybersecurity communities, you'll find that back in Uganda, you find things like ISACA, I Squared, which are good, and they look mostly on governance, controls, and all things like that. When I came to the US, I found other communities like DEFCON. DEFCON, they will bring you the real thing, like the techniques and tactics. The person will bring to you while you're in those meetings. The first time I went to a DEFCON meetup, trust me, somebody just came with all these, brought up all these payloads and all that. And it's just like presenting payloads and showing you that, hey, when you get this and put it here and all that, this is exactly what you will achieve.
Mm-hmm.
So there are very many resources that are here that you see that help you to get where you are very fast. And then in terms of experience, the differences in experience is that when people, because of the resources that are here, it's very, very easy to know exactly where you want to go very, very fast, to choose which part of cybersecurity, to know whether do you want to go to cybersecurity. It's very, very easy to know that because there are a lot of mentors who are here. People tell you this is what is happening. This, if you go to this part of cybersecurity, this is what you expect. And information is freely shared. To be honest, information is freely shared. And there is people do not hold on to these things like their babies. Yeah. And then the culture shocks that are there is that here, when something needs to be done, you do it right there and then. It's not like, oh, I'll do that next month. Is it really urgent? Is it like here, everything is on the go? Like it's more like how technology is cutting edge. You're always on the cutting edge. You're always fixing things like right there and then. There is bureaucracy like everywhere else, but it is not so bad in that it's very easy to get decisions made, and people here have, maybe because the country has experienced, very many companies have experienced attacks. Usually what happens is it's very, very hard to tell an organization that implement this control to protect you from this. They will look at all the finances that are involved and all that, and they'll be like, no, that will probably never happen to me. But here there are very many companies that have been attacked, in that the CEO will hear about a sister company being attacked, and will call you immediately and say, are we safe? Are we safe? What do we have to do? Like, they are always on the go. Like here it is more open. Cybersecurity, if you to bring up that you need to implement certain controls, they accept this faster compared to how it is in Uganda. And there's a lot of security awareness. And the other thing is the fact that there has to be compliance here. There are levels of compliance that you have to have, in that whatever the case, they're going to do audit. You have to be compliant to SOC 2 audit like every year. Like, these are standards that you have to keep, where most companies have to keep that. They are very strict on things like PCI. They are very strict on privacy, like HIPAA, like PII, in that if anything happens, if you're an organization and you handle personal PII information, and it is leaked, it can be very devastating to you. And you have to report it. If you don't report it and it is reported before you, you'll be breaking the law here. As soon as there is a breach and you're found out that there is a breach, I think you have a grace period of about a month to be able to report it that, yes, this happened to me, happened to our organization. Compared to, I have not seen that law in Uganda. I don't know whether it is there right now, but I didn't hear of that law in that, yeah, a company will be breached and yeah, they'll keep quiet just to keep their customers. Yeah. So those are some of the experiences and culture that I hear.
That's interesting because, we have that Data Protection Act, but like you said, you haven't seen so many companies reporting this happened to us. You just hear it in hearsay, but
I think when you're regulated as an entity, you need to report especially to your regulator. So within the banking industry, most times you have some timeline within which you need to report an incident like that. Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you so much for your time, Solomon. It has been quite a very engaging session, very eye-opening. Do you have any parting shots for our audience?
Yeah. Thank you very much as well for hosting me here. In that, the audience, I'll tell them is just whatever you're clicking, just know there's someone behind there who wants your information, who wants what you have. And these days, the attack surface has increased, and attacking is very, very easy. There are very many script kiddies. There is AI that has come into play in that people develop exploits very easily. And scamming, social engineering, these days is very, very easy. Before you find a Chinese who cannot speak English, not able to scam a person who speaks English, well, guess what? ChatGPT is here. It's going to create a very, very good phishing email for him, and then he will compromise you, and he will phish you, and then you fall for it and compromise you. Just be cautious and always think before you act. Think before you click on something.
Yes.
Yep, that's it. That's what I would say.
Thank
you for that. Thank you, Solomon, for gracing us with your presence. And you have definitely given us a lot of things to think about, especially in terms of security and joining communities and all that. So thank you for that.
And having that hackers mindset.
Exactly. So, for our audience, you can comment if you like the show, and check out an episode we had with Olivia Rose, which is episode 18. Other than that, see you all in the next episode.